Not that book, another book.
Kal Kadosh Boker Tov, we're going to continue with Daf Tetzayin Amud Aleph, 16a1. We are going to start by Tashema, which is 2, 4, 5 lines down. Tashema. Okay? We're trying to bring a proof from the following Braita. Nimtzeta Ta'omer. We're going to find that you could actually say Shalosh Midot B'mechitzot. There's going to be 3 different dinim by mechitzot, 3 different laws with respect to mechitzot, which are made out of kanim, which are the reeds. Okay? And we're going to explain. Shehu pachot mishlosha. As long as the distance between one reed and another reed is less than 3 tfachim, so obviously what do we say?
Lavud.
Lavud, very good. Tzarich shelo yeh ben zeh lazeh shlosha. It has to be that there's not a distance between 3 tfachim between them, in order that the gedi cannot come and cannot go, he says, to jump through the revechim right from the mechitza on the other side of Vatrosh without any problem. Okay? So he says over here, right, as follows. Okay? So that's the first one, which means if the space in between each one of these reeds is less than 3 tfachim, it's going to be kosher. However, if the parutz, which is the open area, is going to be more than the omid, right? But remember, that means there's more open area than closed area, okay? So in such a scenario, it's not going to be kosher, okay? Kol shehu shlosha umishlosha ad arba. However, though once it becomes 3 tfachim, exactly, or from 3 until 4 tfachim, okay, but not including 4. So you cannot have the space between one kaneh and another kaneh, the same space of a kaneh, the roch of a kaneh. So it shouldn't be half-half. You remember that we brought down that half-half was a machloket between Rav Papa and Rav Huna ben Yehoshua. If it was going to be more breached than wall, so af keneged haomed asur. So then even keneged haomed of the mechitza, you're not allowed to plant anything. Why? Because this mechitza is not a mechitza whatsoever. Kol shu arba'a, right? Then it says the third one. If it's going to be, you know, 1 second. Let me just check. Pictures. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to look for. Okay. Here it is. If you look here in the picture, I'm sharing the screen. Yeah, everyone sees? You see? Yeah, nimtzet ata omer shalosh midot b'mechitzot. There are 3 midot by the mechitzot. Kol shehu pachot mishlosha. If it's going to be less than 3 tfachim, so here, less than 3 tfachim between each one, tzarich shelo yeh ben zeh lazeh kedei shelo yizaker hagedi v'vatrosh. So it means that it has to be that he cannot come and go through it without any problem. Okay? Then it says, umishlosha ad arba, which means that if this is between 3 to 4 tfachim each one, remember, there's no distance between each one here. Here, the actual beam in itself is between 3 and 4 tfachim. That's this one. So then, you cannot have the full amount of this part in this area. Has to be less. Okay? It's already the Mishnah. Okay, next. I'll put it to the Mishnah, and I'll continue. Okay? The last one, it says over here is, right, the Midah Shlishit. So he comes and he says, Kol shehu arba'a, once it's 4 tfachim, okay, ume arba'a, and 4 tfachim, and above until 10 amot, okay, tzarich shelo yeh ben zeh lazeh kimlo'o, you cannot have also kimlo rochav hakaneh. Why? Shelo yeh parutz ke'omed. You cannot have parutz ke'omed. It cannot be the same. Which means, again, remember, it cannot be equal, the breached area, the open area, and the closed area. Then if it was, so keneged haomed mutar. Opposite the one which is omed, meaning opposite the walls, you're allowed to plant different types of vegetables, right? Because it's not going to be batel, and therefore it's a mechitza. But keneged the parutz, it's going to be asur, right? Why? Because then what's going to happen is you're not going to be mitzaref, right? You're not going to combine it together with mechitza. Okay, so this is all to do with kilayim. Remember, we're talking about...
No pictures of the kilayim there?
There's no pictures. Let me just check here. Also nothing. Okay. No? Okay. This is already Tetzayin Amud Bet. Tetzayin Amud Bet, here he doesn't even have what they had there. Okay, fine. V'imaya omed merubeh ala parutz. So he says, now, if you had more wall than breached area, af keneged the parutz mutar. So then even opposite the parutz, it's going to be permitted. Nifritza beyoter me'eser asur. If right now the mechitza was broken, right, to more than 10 amot, so then you're not allowed to plant anything over there. Okay? So he says, even though that pirza, that breach was only just in that area, it's also going to be prohibited. Hayusham kanima dokranim. If they had kanima dokranim, which is basically, these are like reeds, but they pinch. Right? Doker is to pinch in Hebrew. But dokranim, it says here, meshufim chudadim, they're like sharp, right, which are plugged in the ground. Ve'osela and peah, they're going to make a peah milmala, which are basically zmorot. We're talking about like branches on the top of it. So then, afilu yoter me'eser mutar. Even if it's going to be more than 10, it's going to be permitted. Again, no pictures. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. Fine. So he says, "V'osela em peah milmala afilu yoter me'eser mutar." It's going to be permitted. Okay. Katani mihat reisha. However, though we learned in the reisha of the Braita, nishlosha ve'ad arba, from 3 to 4 tfachim. Right? No, as long as you don't have the same space in between. But this is a tiyuv to the Rav Papa. And this is a raya to Rav Huna ben Yeshua. Why? Because this is a proof that parutz ke'omed, which means if it's the same value, the wall and the breached area, the open area, it's pasul. So this is against Rav Papa, and this is a proof to Rav Huna ben Yeshua that if parutz ke'omed, it's not going to be kosher. So answers the Gemara, Rav Papa is going to answer you, what does it mean here, melo'o? Nichnas v'yotzeh, which means, again, the same answer, which was that it really, be'emet, there's more parutz than the omed. But the parutz was equal means that it's going to be the Torah said, but if it was parutz, it would be kosher. But here we're talking about that you were able to put it in and out easily. So if you're able to put it in and out easily, it means that there's more space, therefore there's more empty space than real wall. And again, if there's more empty space than wall, according to everybody, it's pasul. We could also bring a proof to this. Because we learned in a Braita, if it was going to be parutz more than the omed, right, which means that the breached is more than the walled area, so even keneged omed, even in front of the area which has a wall, is going to be prohibited to plant, right, different types of things there. But if it was omed, which means it was going to be half-half, mutar, it's going to be mutar shmamina. So this is actually a proof, because this is going in accordance to Rav Papa. Remember, there's a machlok between Rav Papa and Rav Huna ben Yeshua. Rav Papa says omed parutz ke'omed, which means half is kosher. Rav Huna ben Yeshua says it's not kosher. Okay, fine. So says the Gemara, but this in itself, if you're bringing me a proof to Rav Papa, so lema atav yitiyuv to Rav Huna ben Yeshua. So why don't we just say it's a proof against Rav Huna ben Yeshua? So Amalecha, he's going to tell you Rav Huna ben Yeshua, v'litamech, and according to your reasoning, Ema Seifa, let's see the Seifa. Ima Yaomed Merubeh Parutz. If right now Omed is going to be Merubeh Parutz, Af Keneged Parutz Mutar. So then even Keneged Parutz is going to be Mutar. Hake Parutz, if it's going to be half-half, should be Asur. So Seifa Kashil Rav Papa, Vereisha Kashil Rav Huna ben Yeshua. So it comes out that you're right. The Seifa, the latter part of the Braita, is actually a question against Rav Papa. But the Reisha, the former part of the Braita, is a question against Rav Huna ben Yeshua. So how do you answer it then? Doesn't make sense. In the same Braita itself, one part is a proof to Rav Papa, and another part is a proof to Rav Huna ben Yeshua. So what's going on? So he says like this: Seifa le Rav Papa lo kashya. The Seifa is not a question against Rav Papa. He says why? Remember, the Seifa said that the heter of omen merubeh parutz is not a question. He says why? He says I did the Tana Reisha parutz merubeh omed. Since in the Reisha we're talking about parutz merubeh omed. Tana Seifa, so too we're talking about in the Seifa, Omen Merubeh Parutz, even though it's the same halacha, if it would have been equal. Meaning, since in one part we're talking about that there's more wall, right? More pirza, more breach than wall. So then we spoke about more wall than breach. But really, if it would have been the same, it would have also been kosher, right? So therefore, it's not a question against Rav Papa. And Reisha also is not a question. Why? I did the Bailamit in the Seifa, since we wanted to learn the Seifa. What was the Seifa? Omen Merubeh Parutz. That there's more, right? There's more wall than breached area. Tana Reisha, so therefore we talked in the Reisha, Parutz Merubeh Omed, right? That Parutz is going to be Merubeh Omed, which means there's going to be more breached than wall, even though if it would have been the exact same, it would have also been pasul. So therefore, each one is not a question. Everyone understood? I see your face, Richard, so I'll repeat it again. One more time. Right? There's a machloket between Rav Huna, Rav Yeshua, and Rav Papa. Right? The machloket is what happens if you have half-half, which means you take the volume, you take the measurements, and it's exactly half wall and half open area. I call it breached area. Breached means because it's as if it was broken open, but you're right. It's half open, half wall. So Rav Papa says it's kosher, half is kosher. Rav Huna, Rav Yeshua says it's not kosher. We ask ourselves in the same braita, we have a stira, because in the former part of the braita, right, the former part of the braita was in accordance to Rav Papa. The latter part of the braita was in accordance to Rav Huna ben Yeshua. So what is it? Decide. Is it kosher or not kosher? So each one is going to answer the following. Each one in his own way is answering that since in one of them we wanted to learn the halacha, and in that case we were talking about more than the other. So for example, in the case of the first one of the Papa, we were talking about that there was more paruts, more open than wall.
And they're
So then,
it invalid.
And therefore it's saying invalid, it's describing the invalid. So therefore, on the other way around, I'm going to flip it. Even though you're right, in Achanami, half would have been okay as well. Still, I inverted it, right? Why? Because in the beginning, we were talking about one. So then now in the other case, where we're making it kosher, right? I would have done the same thing, which means Rav Huna ben Yeshua comes and he tells you that Omem Merubeh ala Parutz is kosher, right? When he tells you that it's kosher, what is he telling you? You need more wall than not wall than open area. So now in the Seifa, when it's telling you that it's pasul, it's going to be more breached than wall, even though in Achanam, according to Rav Huna ben Yeshua, it would have been half, it would have also been invalid, right? It would have been disqualified. But again, he was just trying to teach you because of the other case of the Braita, which means that each one was just trying to give you the inverted case, even though in Achanam, you're right? It would have been correct also if it would have been half for each shita. Capish? Yeah, very good. Bishlam ala Rav Papa. It's good according to Rav Papa. Mishum hachi lo ariv lo vetani lo. That's why they didn't make like a mixture, right, of putting all three cases together, because there's a difference in the halachot, which means we taught three halachot with regarding to the mechitzot, right? We talked about the 3 tfachim within each one. We talked about that each one, if it's 3 to 4 tfachim, so then the space cannot be the same as in between. And then we learned the third one, right? The third halacha. What was the third halacha? We said the third halacha was, I already forgot, that kol shehu arba, if it's going to be 4 until 10, so you cannot have ben zelazeh kim lo'o, which is like the exact same amount of as a kaneh, so that way it shouldn't be parutz keomed. So those are 3 different halachot. So says the Gemara, Bishlam al Rav Papa, it's good according to Rav Papa, that he explains that parutz keomed is going to be, that's what he's saying, how many parutz keomed is mutar, so mishum hachi lo arvu lotanu, that's why we didn't learn them together, but each one is a different case. Okay, because that's what he's saying here. According to Rav Papa, the case of the kanim was exactly 3 tfachim, and the mechitza is still going to be kosher, right? Even though it's going to be 3. But according to Rav Huna ben Yeshua, li'arvinu v'litninu. Why don't I just come and mix up some of the cases together? Why? I should have said.
In the first category, they are qualified by 3 tfachim gaps.
Exactly. Why? Kol shehu pachot mishlosha u'shlosha tzarich shli'er revach ben zel shlosha. Which means if it's going to be less than 3 tfachim or 3 tfachim exactly, you cannot have more of a revach than 3 tfachim. And the reason why was if it's going to be exactly 3 tfachim, 3 against 3, it's going to be equal, which means it's disqualified. So according to Rav Huna ben Yeshua, why don't we mix some of the cases together? According to Rav Papa, makes sense, because we're trying to actually teach us that chidush, that even half is going to be kosher, right? Exactly, meaning not half, meaning equal is going to be kosher. But according to Rav Huna ben Yeshua, just mix them together. So answers the Gemara, Mishum delo dami psula dereisha lepsula deseifa. He says, no, each one has its separate invalidation, meaning each one has its separate quality, which is going to disqualify it. He says, psula dereisha, the psul of the dereisha is kedei shelo yizaker hagedi b'vat that the gedi, that the kid, remember there's a kid goat, right? That he comes and he could jump in within one shot without any problem, which means that there's nothing stopping him, refraining him from going inside. Psul of the seifa, the psul of the seifa is shaliyeh parutz keomed, that it should not be parutz keomed, it shouldn't be half, equal, which means, half wall and half open area. Okay? Next. The Gemara now is going to come and speak about another question in the Braita. The Gemara says, Pachot mishlosha, if it's going to be less than 3 tfachim, mani, who's the one that says that you need that this is halakha, that if it's less than 3 tfachim, you need the 3 tfachim in between, and you cannot have it. What's going on here? At the end of the day, if it's less than 3 tvachim, according to everybody, it should be okay. Right? Because we say levud, and that's it, and we finish off the story. So says the Gemara, Mani, who is this? Rabbanani, the rabbis. Because according to the rabbis, only with less than 3 do you say levud. 3 exactly, you don't say levud anymore. Meaning, according to Shitat Chachamim, the only time it has to be less than 3. You cannot say it with exactly 3. So Ema Seifa, so says the Gemara, 1 second, what about the Seifa of the Braita? It says, Kol Shu Shosha, if it's going to be 3, or 3 or more, until 4. Now, 1 second. If you're going to tell me that the psul is because there's more parutz, right? So he says it's not true. He says, why? Because he says in such a case, right? He says it's also, you don't say levud, because it's going to be 3. So says the Gemara on Tedzayin Bet, we're on the page, it says, Atan l'Rashbag, l'Rishon Gamliel. What does that mean? The Amar Pachom Me'arba'al levud. We're going in accordance to the Shita of Rashbag. Rashbag holds not that by 3 you say levud, by even 4 tefachim you say levud. So according to Shitat Rashbag, you add an extra tefach and you still say levud. The Rabbanan, but if it's going to be according to the rabbis, Mishlosha ve'ad arba'a, shlosha ve'arba'a chadu. What does it mean from 3 until 4? 3 is 4. It's the same thing. Meaning 3 onwards is 4. So I don't have to say from 3 to 4, because it's incorrect. 3 to 4 is anyway like 4. So it says the Gemara, Amar Abaye comes and he says, Miyad midreisha Rabbanan, Sefer Nami Rabbanan. But 1 second. It has to be that if the Reisha right now, which is making a differentiation between the 3, less than 3 and 3 tvachim, is the rabbis, so to the Sefer has to be the rabbis as well, which they're making a differentiation between less than 4, right, and 4. So what's going on then? So Modu Rabbanan dechol mishra kenegdo. So according to the rabbis, they agree that anything which has to do with permitting the planting of the seeds or the yirakot opposite a mechitza, i'ika makom arba'a, if there's going to be a space of 4 tfachim, chashiv, it's considered a mechitza. V'lo, and if you do not have a space of the 4 tfachim, lo chashiv, it's not considered a mechitza, and you're not allowed to plant in front of it, which means that even though there is 3 or more tfachim, right, it's not batel legamre kedin levud. Still, that's what he's modeh. Okay, that's the shita of the chachamim. That means basically what the rabbis are doing, that's what it says here in the footnote, that they're being mechalek, they're distinguishing between the shiur of a mechitza and the shiur of levud. Okay, by levud, even 3 tfachim has a chashivut, and therefore it's not going to be batel, right? And therefore he says we don't say levud. But to do the mechitza, in order to say that it's considered a good mechitza, he says it has to be mashu chashuv, which has to be 4 tfachim minimum. Okay, so therefore that's why it's all going according to the Rabbanan, the rabbis. Okay, Rava comes and he's going to say another answer. So basically like this, what's more important, the former part of the Mishnah or the latter part of the Mishnah? Abaye said the former part of the Mishnah was more important, right? Was we go off to the beginning. So therefore, if the former part was the rabbis, so to the latter part was the rabbis. And now we have to answer up the latter part. According to Rava, it's the exact opposite. The Seifa is more important, but that's what you finish off. So if the Seifa was Rashbag, the Reisha should also be Rashbag. But now you have to answer up the Reisha. So he says, Rashbag, right, levud. When does Rashbag say that we say levud even until 4 tfachim? Hanemile lemala. That's only to do with the upper space, in the space above, going upwards. Aval lemata, but going downwards, like in a korach. Right. It's like basically what happens is that when it goes down, if on the bottom part there's the space, so then even according to him, it's not good enough for, right? You need less, because if not, it's the gedi could just come right through it, and therefore it's not going to be okay. No, todo eso no es. El primero, eso está ya en
we got pictures coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up, but not yet. Okay, fine. So says the Gemara, Tashema, we're going to bring a proof. Difanot halalu shirubam ptachim vechalonot. Right, when you have these difanot, which are these are walls which are going around, shirubam ptachim vechalonot, the majority of the walls is actually doors and windows. So you're allowed to be metaltel in between them. As long as you have more closed area than open area. Shiruban salkadai, are you going to tell me that be'emet you could actually say the majority are windows and doors? Right? If the majority are windows or doors, so then the majority is open. It's not closed. So it says the Gemara, Ela shriba b'hem ptachim v'chalonot mutar. if you actually started putting a whole bunch of windows and doors all around, it's going to be permitted. As long as you have more walls than windows and doors. But if it's going to be exactly equal, it's asur. So to the Rav Papa, there's a question against Rav Papa. Because remember, omed keparutz, which means half, right? Or parutz komed, whichever you want to say it, right? It's going to be pasul. Of course, it's going to be kosher according to Rav Papa.
No,
kosher according to Rav Papa. And here it's saying that it's not going to be good. So says the Gemara, tiyufta, you're right. It's a question against Rav Papa. So says the Gemara, v'hilchata kevated Rav Papa. Right? The halacha is like Rav Papa. So the Gemara is going to ask the obvious question. If you just asked a refutation against Rav Papa and you brought a proof against him, how do you say 2 seconds afterwards that be'emet halacha is like him? How does it make sense? Says the Gemara, yes. Because the fact that the Mishnah is more meduyak, is more precise, like Rav Papa, that a half wall and half open area is kosher, it's not, it was learned in Mishnah, Shrei Pratzot Yoterot Lebinyan, Hakabinyan is going to be mutar, which is like Rav Papa, so therefore we pass it like Rav Papa, even though there is a refutation from a Braita. Mishnah, Ted Zayin Amud Bet. So this is the Mishnah on 16b. It says over here like this, Makifin shlosha chavalim ze lemala mizeh veze lemala mizeh. Right, so you're allowed to put, I'm going to share the screen, because you have it over here. Right, this is the picture. Okay, Makifin, bishlosha chavalim. Here you have 3 different ropes. Okay, each one above the other. As long as you're not going to have one chevel between one rope and another rope, okay, 3 tfachim. Okay, so that means between here and here, you have to have less than 3 tfachim. Here to here, less than 3 tfachim. Okay? Shiur chavalim, the shiur of, that means the shiur, the measurement of these ropes. You could see my cursor. Yeah, everyone sees the cursor? The shiur of these ropes. Yeah, the shiur of these chavalim, the shiur, oops, 1 second.
we learn from there.
The shiur of these chavalim, so it says over here, ovyan yoter al tefach. So the ovi, which is basically, we're talking about now, the thickness is going to be more than a tefach.
The
chevel, of the actual, the rope in itself. It has to be the thickness.
Normally they don't do that.
No, it has to be more than a tefach, so more than 8 centimeters. Okay? In order that everything together should be sarat tfachim, which means like this. If right now you're going to come and you're only going to have less, so you do not have, right, 10 tfachim. So therefore, if you have the size of the rope is 1 tefach, that's already 3. And then you have 3 in between. So that's why here you have sachakol, you have in between everything, you have 10 tfachim. Okay? Makifim bekanim. This is already the next one.
Over here, do you see this picture here, Rabbi? This just says that we're not talking about the size of the rope, we're talking about the spaces.
No, that's another halakha. Go to the next picture.
Okay,
I don't know if there is a picture.
There might be another picture here.
If there's no other picture, it's just going to tell it to you that the thickness of the rope itself is going to be, read it in the art school. Shiur chavalim ovyan yoter al tefach, has to be more than a tefach.
With the Mishnah, yes?
Yes, Mishnah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Makifin bekanim, uvilvad shliya ben kaneh lechavero shosha tfachim. So you're allowed to come and do makifin with kanim, with reeds. Okay. Uvilvad shliya ben kaneh lechavero shosha tfachim. As long as you don't have between one another 3 tfachim. The shayara dibru. So it says over here, when we're talking about now a shayara, we're talking about a big group, a caravan of people that they're all coming together. However, though, by an individual, they were not lenient. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, which means that when the Chachamim were mekilim, were lenient in order to come and to carry, that was only in a case where, right, he says over here, B'shayra, only in the case of a group. But if it's going to be an individual,
crummy partitions when they
when they were a group and they were going around.
Yeah.
Okay, however, though, if it's an individual, they didn't permit it. Chachamim say, no, lo dibru b'shayra ela b'hoveh. They only spoke about a shayra, but really, they were permitting in every case. Meaning, they were speaking about the shayra, but that's what's normal for a shayra to do, for these groups to do. But even an individual could do the same thing. Third shita, kol mechitza she'ena shel sheti ve'erev. Any mechitza which is not sheti ve'erev, which means that it's only one of them. Okay?
That's
So-
vertical and horizontal.
and horizontal. And a mechitza, it's not considered a mechitza. These are the words of Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. And according to him, it's not just enough one way or the other way. It has to be both. Okay, v'chachamim only in the fourth shita, echad mishne dvarim. You need or, which means or erev or sheti. It's considered a mechitza gemura, right? It's going to be okay.
That's
Okay,
what
and
we
that's gonna be
use
for everybody.
That's what we use as rules for the sukkah. That's the whole same concept
Which one?
of the rope, the shloshat tefachim, and
Yes.
to make a wall.
To make
it
a
as
wall. Right? Many times when we were talking about when they have the flimsy, so yeah, when they go around with the, how do you call it? The elastic, no? Not elastic, there's
No.
another thing also. Velcro, no? They go around with the
Yeah.
Velcro to tighten it up. So
I
each
do
one
it.
of them,
I do it. When I used to do it at home, I used to put it like that.
okay. Very good. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Amnuna Amar Rav. Gemara Tetzayin Mubet. Amar Rav Amnuna says Rav Amnuna in the name of Rav. Hare Amru, we already just said in the previous Mishnah in Tetvav Mubet, in last daf, Omem Rubela Parutz Besheti Hav Yomed. When we said Omed Rubela Parutz, when you have more wall than open area, it's considered Omed. So by Rav Amnuna comes and he says, by Erev Mai. What about by the Erev? Do you say the same halacha or not?
What do you
Okay,
mean?
what does that mean? Let me see if I have a picture here. No, I don't have a picture. I do not have a picture here.
These, no? Sim Pasim?
Basically like this. You have Sheti Va'erev, right? So you have the Sheti and then you have the Erev. Okay? So we just said the Sheti, how do you say the Sheti in English?
Vertical.
The vertical. Okay, so now it says over here like this. When we just said by the Sheti, which is the vertical, which is up to down, we just said that if it's going to be, right, that you have more wall than open area, it's going to be kosher even though there's more than 3 tfachim or more. So according to that, the question is, do we say the same thing by Erev or not?
You mean holes in the wall?
Yes.
So they did this on 15b where they was using animal saddles.
Yeah, basically he says here in the footnote that the svara to be more lenient in vertical than horizontal is that when you have vertical, I could say it's an entrance. Meaning I've got here a pole, here a pole. There's a bigger space. Okay, it's an entrance. I'm walking through. But when it's this way and there's a bigger space, I'm not going to say it's an entrance.
Very interesting.
So because of that's what it says in the footnote. That's the kavanah why there's a svara to be more machmir. Okay? So Amr Abaye comes and he says, Tachema, we're going to try to bring a proof. Shiur chavalim, the shiur of the rope in itself has to be more than a tefach. Shiur kol asar tefachim, that everything should be 10 tefachim. V'yi'ita, now if you're going to tell me that omem rubela parutz helps even by erev, so lama li yoter tefach, so why do I need more than a tefach? Le'ave pachom mishlosha ve'chevel mashu, pachom mishlosha ve'chevel mashu, pachom mirbave ve'chevel mashu. Says, 1 second, what's going on here? Why don't I, if you're going to tell me that it does mean that it should be okay, so then what I have to do is this picture. Right? Basically, pachom mishosha, the chevel is mashu. This is any amount, any size. Less than 3, again, any size. Less than 3 here, and then from here, I've got less than 4. By doing it that way, it should also be kosher.
It should be.
It should be. So says the Gemara, "V'tisber," as logical. Hai pachom me'arba'a, hei chamukim le. Where do you put this, which is less than 4 tfachim? He says, imukim la tatay. If you're going to put them on the bottom, so then it's a mechisa shageduim bokimba. If you put the 4 here on the bottom,
The goat could get in.
the goat could get in. So you cannot put the 4 on the bottom. Imukim la, if you're going to put it on the top, that's the next picture. This one, you see? On the top one.
Yeah.
That means on the top, the bottom 2 have 3. The top
And the
one is
top
4.
one's 4.
So ati avira daigisa daigisa matalit. So then you
Yeah,
have the
daigisa.
air on both sides and you mevatel. You remember the air of this side and the air of this side is going to annul the middle. You remember we learned that
I
already?
do not remember that.
So
but
basically,
know.
you remember that when we had to split up, we said that, for example, let's say I have a wall, right? I have a wall, and then I said I wanted to come outside. So we said what you have to do is, here, 1 minute. This is page 45. 1 second. Give me 1 second. So basically, one more time, right? Where are you going to put it? If you're going to put the 4 tfachim on the bottom, a gedia could go through. If you're going to put the 4 tfachim on the top, so you have the empty space up above, which is the air on top, the empty space of the right by the 4 tfachim, and it's going to null it. Okay? So says the Gemara, Ve'im mukim la be'emtza. If you're going to put it, yeah, I lost the place in the Gemara itself. Hold on 1 second. If you're going to put it in the middle, you have more
Open.
wall than parutz from the 2 different sides, right? Because here you have more, right?
Omed merubeh ala parutz.
We learn from here. So if it's considered a wall, so you would have to put it in the middle. Okay? So says the Gemara, Ela Rav Hamnuna hachi kamar. But really, this is what Rav Hamnuna is really trying to say. He says, hachi kamibayle. Kegon, for example, daiti machzelet. You put a carpet, tehavu shiva umashu, which is going to be 7 in a little bit. Bechakak ba shlosha, you made 3 tfachim in the middle. Beshavak ba arba umashu, and you left 4 in a little bit. V'hukme bepachot mishosha, and you put it with less than 3 tfachim. Look, here you have it. This is a carpet, which is 7 tfachim tall. Okay? Yeah, very good. So you have 7 tfachim. When you have the 7 tfachim, what did you do? You chakak, you made a chakika, which is like an opening of 3 tfachim. So you left the 4 tfachim on the top, a little bit below the 3 tfachim, and all this is within 3 tfachim from the bottom. So therefore, since you're doing it in such a case, right? So he says, Rav Hamnuna was mistapek if the mechitza is psula because of the parutz, because of this empty space or not. So Rav Ashi says, no, that wasn't a doubt of Rav Hamnuna. He says the doubt of Rav Hamnuna was, right? Rav Ashi comes and he says, mechitza tluya ibayele. Right, this is the next picture that I just showed you right here. The mechitza tluya is the question. Right? Why? It says over here, Rav Tavla, just like Rabbi Tavla asked from Rav, mechitza tluya, when you have a mechitza which is tluya navid, right, which is basically going to be 3 tfachim or more above from the ground. Look, this is the mechitza, it's 10 tfachim, but it's tluya, it's hanging, because on the bottom you have 3 tfachim, right, which is empty on the bottom. So in such a case, ma'u shetatir bechurba, is it going to permit, right, being metaltel in a churba and a ruins or not?
We do it on a sukkah that way, right? The
Yes.
bottom space is less than
3 tfachim, exactly. Okay? So Amalei, he said, in yes, mechitza tzulia is materet. It is going to be permitted. Okay? So the Gemara is going to say, ela mayim, right? But to do with water. Okay? And then this already is the next page. So that's it.
Yeah.
This is the last one for the pages. Okay? So he says, ela b'mayim, but when we're talking about filling it up with water, which is going to be a Mishnah later on, this is talking about in Peizayin Mubet in a long time, that a gezustera, which is basically like a, one of these balcons, like a balcony, which is outside on top of water, that you're allowed to fill up the water through the hole coming up. So it says, kalhu, it's a leniency, shekilu chachamim b'mayim, that the rabbis were mekel in water.
this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You have a color picture. Here in the art school, we have a not color picture. Okay. So says the Mishnah, right? We go back now we're to the 2 dots, makifim bekanim. So he said you're allowed to do it in a shayera. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. So says the Gemara, shayera in yachid lo, only in a shayera and not in a yachid, not in an individual. But Tanya Rabbi Yehuda says, kol mechitzot Shabbat, lo yitiru yachid. But time, he says, 1 second, I thought that they said that any type of mechitza which is by Shabbat, balachot al Shabbat, they weren't matir to be metaltel, right, liyachid, if it's going to be more than betzatayim, which means if it's going to be betzatayim or pachot mizeh, Rabbi Yehuda says that it is going to be okay if it's going to be for a yachid. Only if it's going to be more than that, it's a problem for a yachid. So it's mashma that yachid and rabbim is the same thing until it gets to a certain size. So it says the Gemara, Kedav Rav Nachman, V'item Rav Bevai Barabai. It's like Rav Nachman says something who says Rav Bevai Barabai, Lo nisicha l'ten lahen kol tzorkan. We're talking about the things is we have to give them all their necessities, which means when the Tana said that it's going to be pasul, okay, bad mechitzot, he didn't say it's pasul legamre. Only to do with it doesn't help if it's going to be greater than betzatayim. And even though the people need such a space, it doesn't help. So to here, we're trying to give them all the space, which means for a shayira, they did permit the mechitzot in such a scenario, right? But for a yachid, they didn't do it if it was going to be more than a betzatayim. Where was it mentioned? Where was this halacha mentioned of Rav Nachman or some people say Rabbi Abaye? So he says, "Ahad itznan," that which we learned in the Mishnah. Kol mechitza shena shasheti ve'erev mechitza. We already said that any type of mechitza which is not the horizontal and the vertical, so he said that it's going to be right, not kosher. That's what he says over here. According to Shtat of Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Hachi. Does he actually say that? So he says, "Vatani, we learned on the right. Echad yachid ve'echad sheira chavalim. That's all the same halachot, whether it's an individual or a group. Uma ben yachid sheira." Right? So he says over here, Uma, what's the difference between the yachid and a shayera? So he says, Yachid notnin lo betzatayim. The yachid, you only give them until betzatayim. And, right, that's a betzatayim shnaim, notnin lo betzatayim. Shlosha, once it becomes a public, which is basically more than 3 people, 3 or more, shayera, it becomes a shayera. You know, notnin lo betzshesh, so we give them even until 6 saying.
Why is shayera? Oh, okay.
That means it becomes a shayera after 3 people. Interesting. He says here that according to this, every single 2 people you add on an extra, every single person you add on 2 seen. So basically, what do we just say? We just said 1 person you do until betzatayim, 2 people also until betzatayim, 3 people, now you're a shayera and you give until 6. Okay.
He's with the Rav Yossi, the son of Rav Yehuda.
Yes, exactly. These are the words of Rav Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Chachamim say, "Echad yachid ve'echad shayera." Doesn't matter whether we're talking about an individual or a group. Notnim lahem kol tzorkam. We're going to give them all whatever they need. Uvilvad shle betzatayim panui. As long as it's not going to be more, right? A betzatayim that you're not actually using, that it's panui. Okay. That means according to this shita, Rav Yossi Rabbi Yehuda is going to be matir to be metaltel with mechitzot like this. Not like our Mishnah. So then this is what they said. What does that mean? The words of Yosef Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah was only to give them their necessities, which means when Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda said Kol mechitza shena shetavin is not a mechitza, he didn't want to say that it doesn't help at all. He just said that it's not going to help for all the necessity of the people. But really, it is going to help for certain things, which is basically a betzatayim for yachid or for 2 people, right? And 6 saying for a shayera. Okay. Fine. So Darash Rav Nachman comes and he expounds and he says the following. Okay, Mishum Rabbeinu Shemuel and the name of Rabbeinu Shemuel.
Are you going to 17?
No, I'm still on 16 on Ben.
Okay.
Right? Yachid notnim lo betzatayim. An individual you give him betzatayim. Shnayim, 2 people you give him betzatayim. 3 people they become a shayera and then you give them 6 saying. So says the Gemara, Shavakt Rabbanan ve'avadta ke Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. What? You're leaving behind the rabbis and you're doing like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda? I'm saying at the end of the day, how does that make sense? Saying according to the rabbis, they say that you give him kol tzorcho, whether it's an individual or a shayera. And here we're saying, no, you have to give it each one according to the necessities, which means 1 person, betzatayim, 2 people, betzatayim, 3 people. No, according to the rabbis, it's equal. Shayera and the yachid is equal. So says the Gemara, then he went and he put another amura, and he said, and he was doresh as follows. And he said like this. He says, "Devarim shamarti lifnechem tautem yadi." Whatever I told you before was a mistake. Beram, however, though kachamnu, this is what they said: Yachid notnim lo betzatayim. A yachid, we're going to give them betzatayim. Shnayim notnim lahem betzatayim. 2 people are giving them betzatayim. Shosha nasa sheira notnim lahem kol tzorkan. And they're going to, which means Rav Nachman went and he fixed it to do the shayara, that it should actually be in accordance to the chachamim, because the chachamim said that by shayara. Notnim lahem kol tzorkan. He didn't say until 6. Until 6 was the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. So he fixed it and he said, no, that meant you could give them whatever they want, whatever they need. Notnim lahem kol tzorkan. So then the Gemara is going to start asking about the concept of, the Reish is 1, the Seif is the other, and we're going to go back and forth in order to finish up. So B'ezrat Hashem, we continue tomorrow.